absolutely wonderful to work with her and with the rest of the Nepal team. And I'm very happy to be here today. We've had a really wonderful few days already in Nepal. I'm going to talk briefly about the project. I hope we can get the PowerPoint up. Oh. So as Professor Sakari said, is it my fault? It's okay?
Yes.
Yeah, as she said, we started in 2020, and it was literally in the height of lockdown. So we worked online for about 2 years, but we still managed to get quite a community and family going. And as she says, now we're like a family. It's a great consortium. And we're working across Nepal, India, Ghana, and Ethiopia, and the UK. And as I said, this is a project funded by UKRI, the UK. And our challenge is about off-grid sanitation in rapidly urbanizing areas in Asia and Africa. As you've seen in Kathmandu and in Nepal too, it really is a challenge in terms of tackling sanitation and waste, and this goes to the heart of what we're looking at. So why is it interesting? Why do we actually have to tackle the challenge of urban sanitation? Half the world's population is urban, and this is a rapidly growing population, and most of that population actually lives in small towns that are rapidly growing spaces. As you're probably aware, access to sanitation, I'll stay here. Access to sanitation is critical for health, for well-being, for livelihoods, for gender equality, for keeping girls in school, and even for the economy in general, but it is one of the most off-track Sustainable Development Goals. And here you see the statistics there. And this is despite decades and decades of efforts. So mostly the option has been the centralized top-down networked option, especially in the global north. But this option doesn't really exist and is not really a viable one for most parts of the global south, especially in the cities of South Asia, Ethiopia, Ghana, and places where we find ourselves in. Like Nepal had a massive toilet campaign and is open defecation free officially. India also had this campaign. And a lot of the emphasis is on toilets, but what we're interested in is we've got to go beyond the toilet. And why is it important to go beyond the toilet? This is because the waste that comes out from the toilet, the shit, the excreta, what actually happens to it? Where does it go? And that's really what we're interested in looking at. And it's really important because we know that this has a lot of pathogens, there can be a lot of invisible flows of wastewater, and there's really no provision to actually deal with it. So this is really, goes to the heart of what we're interested in looking at. These urban spaces, there's a lot of unsafe excreta disposal, there's poor fecal sludge management and wastewater flow. And these areas are also inhabited by some of the poorest and most marginalized groups of society. So migrants, Dalits, minorities, landless, low caste, etc. And a lot of these groups, that's better, yeah. So a lot of these groups are basically denied their basic rights to water and sanitation. We're also looking at the intersection between gender, caste, class, and that also increases axes of marginality. So this makes it one of the world's most compelling challenges, the issue of addressing sanitation and waste issues in rapidly urban spaces. So what our project is trying to do is, can we actually flip the lens? Rather than looking at this as something that is dreadful, can we actually look at waste as a resource? Because this fecal sludge is actually very rich in nutrients. There's a lot of potential. And that's why we're talking about it as brown gold. So brown gold here is a safe reuse of shit or wastewater that unlocks its potential as a resource. We were just in the fecal sludge plant, the successful one in Malakshmi municipality. And you can really see a small decentralized plant where they can grow crops that can then feed orphans, and there's also the reuse of biogas. So in some ways you can actually unlock that waste and really make it into a very useful product. So that issue of resource recovery is what we're looking at. But it's kind of a long way to get there, and that's why we're calling it towards brown gold, because there's a whole host of socio-technical and institutional processes that we need to address, and those are the issues that we're looking at.
So we're interested in how local communities live with these off-grid challenges. We're looking at issues of marginality and agency, and we're also looking at some of the policy and regulatory frameworks that enable, disable the scaling up of these different innovations. So what's really exciting about our project is that we are interdisciplinary, and that's also been an interesting journey because we have to learn how to communicate with each other. It took a while for us to understand how to engage engineers and social sciences. So the social science is interested in understanding questions of access, inequality, marginality, power relations, also the policy process, the institutional process, and also different perceptions. You know, even if you have resource recovery, is it socially acceptable? I understand in the Nevari community it is, but in some communities it isn't. So, you know, we really have to study some of those cultural issues. The natural science is looking at the robustness of the sanitation supply chain, the ship flows, the pathogens, and some of the other innovations around that, but also the feasibility of low-cost innovation and technologies. And finally, we've also had an arts element where the inclusive arts has drawn on performative interventions to reveal some of these invisible aspects of people's lives, generate dialogue, spark engagement and conversations involving different groups. So this is our group, some of us, many couldn't make it, but we had a very nice meeting in Chandragiri Hills before coming here. So I'll just briefly talk to you about where we're working. So Dr. Alfred Gongalf was here, and IMI colleagues are working in Ghana, and here they're looking at the opportunities to recover and reuse fecal sludge. A lot of farmers are using it anyway, but we just need to make sure that it's safe. So looking at how this waste can really be reused, especially because fertilizer costs are going up. And they've also done very interesting training to support safety and sustainability. So IIT colleagues are working in Kerala, in Alapi. Many of you may have heard about it. It's a very famous tourist destination with the famous backwaters. But it doesn't, you know, it's also very innovative in terms of decentralized waste management issues. And Professor Narayan and others have got this living lab of decentralized waste systems. But there's a lot of issues there that need to be looked at in terms of the policy process, but also links between flood, sanitation, and health, and indeed the whole issue of sanitation work and marginality, and a whole history of exclusion, illegality, and informality. In another site in India, in Maharashtra, in Nanded, there was an urban experiment around community-led total sanitation about 10 years ago. It didn't last very long, so we went 10 years on to see what the legacy of that approach was and what the challenges were. And we find that there's still a lot of barriers in terms of wastewater leakage, a lot of marginality, a lot of marginal areas and marginal people kind of live in the same place and are excluded. A lot of caste-based oppression, still have manual scavenging even though it's actually prohibited. And we've also been looking at some of the institutional processes and the challenges around sustainability. And finally, in Ethiopia, in Tigray, in the Tigray region in northern Ethiopia, it was actually in a brutal war, and that's why we didn't even have contact with our colleague for about 18 months. We've just had a reunion with him, which has been really great. And he was looking at the whole flows of scarcity, wastewater, sanitation challenges, and also what happened in the war was urban agriculture really witnessed a boom because of the food scarcity and the food shortages, and the fact that there was a siege, similar to what you have in Gaza, but much longer. And in that sense, there was no food or resources coming there, so people took to urban agriculture, reusing wastewater. So he's been looking at the safety issues, but also the business models, the institutional arrangements. And finally in Nepal, which has been the Nepal team is pretty amazing and has done a lot of work. So Gudaria was the first open defecation-free municipality, but it's still, as we've looked at in the research, far away from safety managed sanitation. And even though there are lots of toilets, there's a lot of problems with fecal sludge. The fecal sludge treatment plant is not working properly. There's a whole issue around collection, limited protection for sanitation workers, and actual reuse, safe reuse and resource recovery is linked to issues of how many animals do you have, your land, your resources. So the Nepal team, should we introduce them now or? No. Okay. So that's our Nepal team. We're working with IDS Nepal, Water Aid, etc. And it's been exciting work. And we also have these mud houses in Lumbini Park. This is funded by the British Council, which have served as spaces for learning, discussion, and also performance to discuss issues about ecosystem. So thanks very much. That's the introduction.